blood on Ilara's hands had already dried to a rusty brown by the time she reached the spirit dealer's door. Not her blood, her sister's. Mira had been coughing it up since dawn, each spasm leaving another spray of crimson across the thin blanket they shared on the floor of the pack house cellar. The healer had come, looked at Mira's greying skin and said one word: spirit rot. Then she'd left without offering so much as a cloth to wipe the girl's mouth. Ilara knew what spirit rot meant. She'd seen it take 2 wolves last winter, their spirits dissolving inside them, like sugar in hot water, until there was nothing left but a hollow body that breathed but never woke. The cure existed. It always existed. But it required essence. Pure wolf spirit essence, distilled and administered within 72 hours of the first blood cough. And Ilara was an omega, the lowest, the nothing. She had no money, no allies, no leverage of any kind, except the one thing every wolf was born with. The spirit dealer's shop sat at the edge of Ashvale territory in a converted grain silo that smelled of formaldehyde and burnt sage. Ilara pushed through the heavy door, her bare feet leaving damp prints on the concrete floor. She'd lost her shoes 3 months ago, when Gregor the Beta's son had thrown them into the river for sport. No one had offered her new ones. She'd stopped expecting them to. The dealer's name was Vessels. Not his real name, obviously. He was a thin man with a face like a hatchet, sitting behind a counter cluttered with glass vials that pulsed with faint, trapped light. Each one contained a wolf spirit extracted and preserved. Some glowed amber, some silver. Some were barely visible, pale as morning fog. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes did what everyone's eyes did. They catalogued her, the 2 sharp collarbones visible through her threadbare shirt, the scar that ran from her left temple to her jawline, courtesy of Gregor's boot heel 2 summers ago, the general grime of a girl who was allowed to use the pack showers only on Sundays. What he said was, "You can't afford anything here." What she said was, "I want to sell." His eyebrows lifted, just slightly. "Sell what?" "My wolf spirit." The silence that followed tasted like iron. Ilara swallowed against it. She knew what she was offering. A wolf without her spirit wasn't dead, not exactly. But she would never shift again. Never feel the moon pull at something deep and wild inside her chest. Never run on 4 legs through the birch forests, with the wind threading through her fur. She would become, in every way that mattered to their world, human. Less than human, actually. Because humans didn't live among wolves. A spiritless wolf was a ghost among the living, a permanent servant without even the faint dignity of pack hierarchy. Vessels leaned forward. "Your spirit. You understand what that means." "I understand what my sister dying means more." He studied her for a long moment. Then he reached beneath the counter and pulled out a device that looked like a glass syringe attached to a copper coil. "It's painful," he said, "and permanent. How much will you give me for an omega spirit?" He shrugged. 300 silver, barely enough to power a low-grade talisman. 300. Mira's treatment cost 250. That left 50 for food. Maybe a month of eating something other than the scraps from the pack kitchen. "Do it," Ilara said. She didn't let herself think about it. Not when he positioned the device against her sternum. Not when the copper coil began to heat against her skin, smelling of hot metal and something alive and terrified. Not when the extraction began, and it felt like someone was pulling her spine out through her chest vertebra by vertebra, each one scraping against bone as it went. She screamed. She couldn't help it. The sound that came out of her throat was not human and not wolf. It was the sound of something being unmade. When it was over, she lay on the concrete floor, gasping. The world looked different already, flatter. The colors had bled out of things. The dealer's shop, which had smelled of sage and formaldehyde, now smelled of nothing at all. Her nose, which had once been able to detect a rabbit at 200 yards, registered only the immediate. Concrete dust, her own sweat. Vessels held up a vial. Inside it, something glowed. A deep, surprising gold, much brighter than an Omega's spirit should have been. He stared at it, then at her. "Interesting," he murmured. But Elara wasn't listening. She was already reaching for the payment, already counting the silver, already thinking about Mira's pale face and the clock ticking down inside her sister's dissolving spirit. She didn't notice the way Vessels turned the vial over in his hands, watching the golden light move like something sentient. She didn't notice him reach for his communication crystal, pressing a sequence that connected to a specific buyer, one who had been searching for a very particular type of spirit for a very long time. She was already gone, running barefoot through the cold night, with 300 silver clutched against her hollow chest, not knowing that in a war camp 60 miles north, a crystal was lighting up on the desk of the most powerful alpha in the known territories. And everything was about to change. Mira's treatment cost exactly what the healer had quoted. Elara paid in cash, counting out each coin on the infirmary counter, while the healer watched with barely concealed curiosity. An Omega with 250 silver was unusual. An Omega with bare feet and a scar like a canyon down her face, paying for spirit rot treatment, was unprecedented. "Where did you get this?" the healer asked. "Does it matter?" The healer looked at her for a moment. Something flickered across her face. Not sympathy exactly, but something adjacent to it. A recognition, perhaps, of what this much money must have cost a girl like Elara. "The treatment takes 3 days," the healer said finally. "She'll need to stay here." "Can I stay with her?" "No. The cellar is your assigned quarters. You know the rules." Elara knew the rules. She'd been knowing the rules for 9 years since her parents died in the border raid, and she'd been absorbed into Ashvale Pack as a charity case. A charity case with chores that started at 4 in the morning and ended when the last dish was dried. A charity case who slept on a pallet in the cellar between the broken furniture and the water heater that leaked rust. She went back to the cellar. She lay down on her pallet, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely empty. Not metaphorically, physically. There had always been something warm at her center, something that pulsed with the moon and stretched when she was afraid and curled tight when she was content. Her wolf, her spirit. Now there was just space, cold space, like someone had scooped out her insides and left the shell. She pressed her hand to her sternum, where a circular burn mark from the copper coil was already scabbing over. It hurt. But Mira was going to live. Mira, who was 14, who laughed like wind chimes, who still believed that someday their pack would see them as more than burdens. Mira was going to live. That was enough. That had to be enough. 3 days later, Mira sat up in the infirmary bed and asked for toast. Elara cried. She stood in the infirmary doorway, still wearing the same shirt she'd worn to the spirit dealer's shop, because she owned exactly 2, and the other was being used to patch a hole in the cellar wall, and she cried while her sister ate toast with butter and complained that it was cold. "Elara," Mira said, her mouth full. "Why are you crying? I'm fine." "See, fine." "I know." Elara wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I'm just happy." "You smell different," Mira said suddenly. She set down the toast. Her nostrils flared. "Elara, you smell empty. Where's your wolf? Don't worry about it." "Elara." I said, "Don't worry about it." Mira's face crumpled. She was young enough to still have that terrible transparency, where every emotion wrote itself across her features in real time. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I saved your life," Elara said. "Now eat your toast." The news spread through Ashvale Pack like oil on water. The Omega sold her spirit. The Omega is spiritless. The Omega is nothing now, not even wolf. The reaction was not sympathy. It was never sympathy. Gregor found her in the Pack kitchen the next morning, where she was elbow-deep in breakfast dishes. He stood in the doorway with two of his friends, all three of them tall and well-fed, and smelling of forest and morning run. Things she would never smell again. "Heard you're empty now," Gregor said. He leaned against the doorframe, picking at his teeth with a wooden splinter. "Spiritless. That means you're not even Pack anymore, technically. You're just a human, living in our house." Elara said nothing. She kept washing the dishes, a plate with egg residue crusted on the rim, a mug with coffee stains shaped like half-moons. "My father says you should be expelled," Gregor continued. His voice was casual, almost bored. "Humans don't belong in Pack territory. It's a security risk." "Then expel me," Elara said to the dish in her hands. Gregor stepped closer. She could feel the heat of him behind her, the casual menace of a wolf who had never once in his life been powerless. "Maybe we will. After the Alpha Summit next week. Father doesn't want any drama before then." He flicked water from the sink at the back of her neck. "Cold." She flinched. "Where would you even go?" he asked. "The human cities?" "You don't know anyone there. You don't have documents. You don't have money." He laughed, short and sharp. "You'd be dead in a week." He left. His friends followed. One of them, a wolf named Callum, paused at the doorway. He opened his mouth like he might say something. Then he closed it, shook his head slightly. Left. Elara finished the dishes. Her hands were pruned and red. The burn mark on her sternum throbbed under her shirt. 1 week until the Alpha Summit. 1 week until they threw her out. She had 7 days to figure out how to keep herself and Mira alive in a world that had never wanted them. The Alpha Summit was hosted at Ashvale because Ashvale's Alpha, a thick-necked man named Darius, had been lobbying for the honor for 3 years. It meant something, apparently. Prestige, recognition, a chance to lick the boots of the larger packs and maybe negotiate a favorable border treaty. Elara didn't care about politics. She cared that the summit meant triple the cooking, triple the cleaning, and triple the number of wolves looking at her like she was furniture. Or less than furniture. Furniture at least served a purpose without provoking disgust. The morning of the first summit day, she was assigned to floor duty in the Great Hall. On her knees with a brush and a bucket of water that smelled of lye-scrubbing stone tiles, while delegates from 6 packs filed past her. Some stepped over her, some stepped on her fingers. One, a tall female with braided silver hair, actually paused and said, "Is that a human, Huesor?" to her companion, who shrugged and said, "Spiritless Omega, same thing." Elara kept scrubbing. The lye was eating at a small cut on her left hand, sending bright, sharp pain up her wrist. She focused on that. Pain was useful. It meant you were still alive. She was on her 3rd pass over the same section of floor when the hall went quiet. Not gradually, not a slow fade of conversation. Instantly, as if someone had pressed a mute button on the entire room. 200 wolves silent. Ilara looked up. He stood in the doorway of the great hall, like the doorway had been built specifically for him, and still wasn't quite large enough. He was taller than any wolf she'd ever seen, broad across the shoulders in a way that spoke of violence done and survived. His hair was black, not dark brown that people called black, actually black, like a raven's wing, like ink, like the inside of a closed room. It fell past his jaw in a way that should have looked unkempt, but instead looked deliberate, like everything about him was deliberate. His eyes swept the room. Amber, not hazel, not brown with gold flecks. Amber like tree resin, like whiskey, held up to candlelight like the wolf spirits she'd seen glowing in Vessel's shop. This was Kael Voss, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the wolf who had conquered 3 packs before his 25th birthday, the wolf whose name made other alphas drop their gaze, the wolf about whom it was said that his beast was so large and so savage that he had to keep it chained behind walls of iron, will constantly, even in sleep. He wore black. Simple. No gold, no ceremonial furs, no crown. He didn't need them. The room bowed to him without them. Literally bowed. Wolves she'd never seen lower their heads were suddenly very interested in the floor. His entourage followed. 4 warriors, each massive in their own right, looking like children standing next to him. Ilara should have bowed too, should have pressed her forehead to the tile and stayed there until he passed. That was protocol for an Omega, for a spiritless nothing, for whatever she was now. But she was frozen. Her brush dripped lye water onto the stone. Her knees ached against the tile, and something was happening in her chest, in that empty space where her wolf had lived. Something stirred. Something twitched like a limb coming back to life after being numb. Impossible. There was nothing there. Vessels had taken everything. Kael Voss was walking past her, close enough that she could smell him, even with her diminished half-human nose. Pine resin, wood smoke, and something underneath, something deep and old and wild-like, standing at the edge of a cliff in a thunderstorm. Even without her wolf, even without proper scent receptors, she could smell him, like he was screaming it directly into her nervous system. He stopped. He stopped walking mid-stride, and every wolf in his entourage nearly collided with him. The room, already silent, became somehow more silent. A silence with weight. Kael Voss turned his head, slowly, like a predator hearing a twig snap in the underbrush. He was looking at her. No, he was looking through her, into that empty hollow space where her wolf should have been. His amber eyes widened, his nostrils flared, his jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin, and the sound that came from his chest wasn't a word. It was a growl, low and deep and vibrating at a frequency that made her teeth ache. "Who?" he said. His voice was exactly what she would have expected, and nothing like she was prepared for. Low, rough, like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Who are you?" It wasn't a question, it was a demand. The kind of demand that had toppled kingdoms. Ilara opened her mouth. No sound came out. She was kneeling on a wet floor in a stained shirt, with lye burns on her hands, and a brush clutched against her chest like a weapon, and the most powerful alpha in the known world was staring at her like she'd just appeared out of thin air. "Mate," he said. The word fell from his mouth, like it had been sitting there his whole life, waiting. "You are my mate." Then, quieter almost to himself, "Where is your wolf?" The brush slipped from her fingers and clattered against the stone. The hall erupted. Not into chaos exactly, but into a barely contained frenzy of whispered shock. 200 wolves all watching as the Alpha King crouched, actually crouched, lowering his massive frame until he was eye level with a spiritless Omega scrubbing floors. This close, Ilara could see the scars, 3 of them pale and fine, running diagonally across his throat, another across the bridge of his nose, evidence of a life spent fighting, evidence of things that had tried to kill him and failed. "Your wolf," he said again. His hand reached out, hovered near her face without touching. She could feel the heat of his palm like a campfire. "I can feel the bond, but it's damaged, thin." "Where is your wolf?" "Gone," Ilara whispered. "I sold it." His eyes changed. The amber didn't darken. It caught fire. A golden blaze that had nothing to do with tenderness and everything to do with something ancient and violent waking up. "You sold it," he repeated. "My sister was dying. Spirit rot. I didn't have any other way." Kael Voss stood. The motion was fluid-controlled, but Ilara could see the effort it took. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from restraint, from something enormous pressing against the inside of his skin, trying to get out. "Who bought it?" he asked. His voice had dropped another octave. It barely sounded human. "A dealer. Vessels. On the east edge of Ashvale territory." He turned to his warriors. "Find him. Now." 2 of them peeled off, immediately moving toward the door with a speed that made the other delegates step back. Then Kyle turned to the room. To Darius, the Ashvale Alpha, who was standing near the head table, with his face the color of old cheese. "This woman," Kyle said, "is my fated mate, and she has been on her knees, scrubbing your floor." Each word landed like a blow. Darius flinched on the last one. She's just an Omega," Darius stammered. "A spiritless one at that. She's not even technically Pack anymore. Your Majesty, I assure you we had no idea that she was what?" Kyle's voice went quiet. Quiet like the moment before a building collapses. Was someone who mattered? She was always someone who mattered. Every person in this hall is someone who matters. But she, he looked back at Ilara. Something in his face shifted, softened just at the edges, just enough to be devastating. "She is mine, and you have starved her." He said it so simply, like stating a fact about the weather, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Get up," he said to her, not unkindly. "You're done kneeling." Ilara's legs shook when she stood. Her knees were bruised and wet. The lye burns on her hands stung, and that stirring in her chest, that impossible flutter in the hollow space, intensified, like whatever remained of her connection to the wolf world was reaching toward this man with desperate, broken fingers. "I can't," she started. "I'm spiritless. I can't even feel the bond properly. Whatever you're sensing, it's one-sided. I'm not. You're not what—" He stepped closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to see his face. Close enough that his scent wrapped around her like a blanket. "Not worthy. Not enough. Not wolf." Something dangerous moved behind his eyes. "I don't care. The bond chose you. My wolf chose you, and I have never in my entire life wanted to touch someone the way I want to touch you right now." He didn't touch her. His hand, still raised, curled into a fist and dropped to his side. Control. Iron control, with flames licking at the edges. "Come with me," he said. "My sister Ilara said immediately. She's in the infirmary. She's 14. I'm not leaving without her." Something flickered across his face. Not annoyance. Something closer to approval. "Then we'll bring her too." Darius tried to object. Of course he did. He intercepted them in the corridor outside the hall, his face shining with sweat, his beta close behind. The beta was Gregor's father, a man named Oren, who had the same mean eyes as his son, but wore them with a veneer of political competence. "Your Majesty," Darius said, his hand spread in a gesture meant to appear conciliatory. "Perhaps we should discuss this in private. The Omega, Ilara. She has obligations here, a contract with the pack, maintenance duties. We can't simply release her without—" Kyle stopped walking. He didn't turn around fully, just angled his head, showing Darius his profile. The scar across his throat, the line of his jaw tight as a drawn bow. "Say that again," Kyle said softly. Darius swallowed audibly. "I only mean, there are procedures. You kept my mate as a servant." Kyle's voice was conversational, pleasant almost. "You housed her in a cellar. You fed her scraps. You allowed her to be scarred." His gaze flicked to Ilara's face, to the mark running temple to jaw. "You watched her sell her wolf spirit because you denied her the basic resources to save a dying child, and now you want to discuss procedures." He turned fully then, and whatever Darius saw in those amber eyes made him take a step backward, then another. "Here is what's going to happen," Kyle said. "I'm taking her and her sister. You're going to stand there and watch, and then you and I are going to have a very different conversation about what Ashvale Pack owes me for every day my mate spent on her knees in your hall. Am I clear?" Darius nodded. Quick jerky like a puppet on strings. Oren the beta said nothing, but Ilara caught something on his face as she passed. A flash of something that wasn't rage or contempt. It looked for just a moment like relief. Like a man who had been carrying a secret weight and was finally watching it get lifted from his shoulders. Strange. She didn't have time to think about it. Kyle's hand was at the small of her back, not touching, hovering a centimeter from her shirt, guiding her down the corridor toward the infirmary. Mira was sitting up in bed, reading a water-damaged paperback romance, when Ilara walked in with the Alpha King of the Northern Territories behind her. The book fell out of her hands. Her mouth opened. Stayed open. "This is Mira," Ilara said. "Mira, we're leaving." "What?" Mira said. "Now. We're leaving now." Mira looked at Kyle, looked at Ilara, looked at Kyle again. Her 14-year-old brain was clearly trying to process several impossible things at once. "Is that?" she whispered. "Yes. Yes. Are we being kidnapped?" Despite everything, despite the impossibility of the morning, despite the hollow ache in her chest and the lie burns on her hands, and the fact that her entire life had just detonated and reformed into something she couldn't begin to understand, Ilara laughed. "No," she said. "We're being rescued." Kyle said nothing, but when Ilara glanced at him, the corner of his mouth was turned up. Just slightly, like a man trying very hard not to smile and failing. They traveled north in a convoy of 3 black vehicles. Kyle's warriors drove. Mira fell asleep against Ilara's shoulder within minutes, her body still recovering her breathing deep and even. The paperback romance was clutched against her chest like a teddy bear. Kyle sat across from them in the back of the armored car. He hadn't spoken since they left the infirmary. He just watched. Not in a way that felt predatory. In a way that felt patient, like a man cataloguing every detail of something precious that he'd been waiting for. "You're staring," Ilara said finally. "Yes. It's unnerving." "I know." He didn't stop. His amber eyes moved over her face with an attention that felt physical. "You're thin." "I'm aware." "And injured." His gaze dropped to her hands, where the lie burns were visible even in the dim interior of the car. "Also aware." And you sold your wolf spirit 3 days ago to save your sister's life. He said it like he was trying to comprehend it, like the concept was simultaneously admirable and enraging. You understand that a wolf spirit once extracted bonds to its container. It can't simply be returned. I know. Ilara's hand went to her sternum, the scab, the hollow. I made my choice. There is a way, he said, quiet, careful. But it's complicated, and expensive, and possibly illegal in 6 territories. What way? A sympathetic resonance restoration. The spirit must be returned to the original host by someone whose bond is strong enough to bridge the gap. A mate bond, for instance. If it's powerful enough. If the spirit hasn't been corrupted or diluted. Ilara stared at him. You're saying you could give it back to me? I'm saying I intend to try, but first I need to find it. His jaw tightened. My warriors will locate this dealer, and then we'll see what he's done with your spirit. Why? The word came out before she could stop it. You don't know me. You met me an hour ago. I was on my knees with a brush and you just upended everything. Why? Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the landscape blurred past, birch forests giving way to darker pines as they moved north. Because my wolf has been silent for 6 years, he said finally. 6 years of nothing. No warmth, no recognition, no pull toward anyone. I thought I was broken. I thought the bond was a myth, or that mine had died somehow. And then I walked into that hall, and my wolf... He stopped, swallowed, started again. My wolf screamed your name, not your actual name, a feeling, like coming home after a war that never ended, like breathing after holding my breath for 6 years. He looked out the window, then back at her. So no, he said. I don't know you, but I know what you are to me. And I will burn down anyone and anything that tries to take that away. Ilara didn't know what to say to that. So she said nothing. She just sat there in the back of an armored car, moving north at high speed, with her sister sleeping on her shoulder, and an Alpha King's amber eyes burning steadily across from her in the dark. The Northern Territory's capital wasn't what she expected. She'd imagined something austere, military, barracks and watchtowers and wolves in formation. Instead, the convoy pulled through iron gates into a compound that looked like it had grown organically from the forest around it. Buildings of dark timber and stone scattered among old-growth pines. Warm light in every window. Smoke rising from chimneys. The smell of cooking meat and baking bread carried on the evening air. Even without her wolf senses, she could smell it. That was how rich and warm it was. A human nose could catch it. Roasting garlic, yeast, something sweet like maple. Welcome to Thornhold, Kyle said. Mira stirred awake, looked out of the window, said, Oh, it's pretty. It was pretty. It was in fact the most beautiful place Ilara had ever seen. Not because it was grand or ornate, because it was alive, because people moved between the buildings with purpose and ease, because children ran between the trees shrieking with laughter, because there was a warmth here that had nothing to do with temperature. Kyle led them to a wing of the main house, a suite of rooms with thick rugs on the floor and a fireplace already crackling. 2 beds, both with blankets that looked so soft, Ilara was afraid to touch them with her damaged hands. These are yours, he said, both of you. For as long as you want them. We can't just... Ilara started. You can. He was standing in the doorway, taking up most of it, watching her move through the room, touching things tentatively. The curtains, the wood of the bed frame, a ceramic bowl on a side table, blue glazed and smooth. "I have questions," she said. "Tomorrow." His voice had gone gentle in a way that seemed to surprise even him. "Tonight eat. Sleep. Your sister needs rest. So do you." He started to leave, paused, turned back. "One thing," he said. "The dealer. Vessels. When my warriors arrived at his shop, it was empty. He'd cleared out. Taken everything." Ilara's stomach dropped. "My spirit. We'll find it." The amber in his eyes flared. "I promise you that. Whatever it takes." Then he was gone. The door closed softly behind him, and Ilara stood in the warmest, safest room she'd ever occupied, feeling colder inside than she had in the Ashvale cellar. Her spirit was gone. Really gone. Lost somewhere in the world with a dealer who had vanished. Mira appeared at her side, took her hand, squeezed. "We'll figure it out," Mira said. 14 years old and already braver than Ilara felt. "Yeah," Ilara said. "We will." The next 3 weeks were a study in contradictions. On the outside, Ilara's life transformed so completely that she barely recognized it. She ate 3 meals a day. She slept in a bed. She wore clothes that fit, that were clean, that didn't have holes patched with other holes. A healer tended her lie burns, her bruised knees, the scar on her face. She couldn't do much about the scar, but she could soften it, make it less angry, less visible. On the inside, Ilara remained hollow. The bond pulled at her. She could feel it faintly, like hearing music from very far away through a closed window. Kyle's presence registered as warmth, his absence as cold. But without her wolf to amplify it, without the spiritual conduit that made the mate bond a living, breathing connection. It was like trying to drink water through a pinhole. Not enough. Never enough. Kyle felt it differently. She could tell by the way he watched her. By the way his hand would reach for her and then stop curling back. By the way he'd enter a room and immediately find her, his eyes tracking her like she was magnetic north. He never pushed, never demanded, never used the power differential between them as leverage. He simply waited, present, but patient. They talked. Every evening after dinner, when Mira had gone to read in her room, she'd discovered the library and was working through it with systematic teenage intensity. Kyle would find Ilara in whatever corner she'd tucked herself into, the kitchen garden, the library window seat, the small balcony overlooking the western forest. He'd sit near her, not too close, and he'd talk or listen, mostly listen. "Tell me about your parents," he said one evening. "They died in a border raid when I was 8. Mira was 5. And Ashvale took you in, if you can call it that." Ilara pulled her knees to her chest. They were on the balcony, wrapped in separate blankets. The night air smelled of pine and frost. "We were never family. We were obligations. And after a while, we weren't even that, just bodies to do the work." "The scar," he said carefully. "Gregor, Beta's son. He kicked me when I was 14. His boot had a metal heel cap. The healer stitched it, but didn't bother numbing it first. Said it would be a waste of supplies on an Omega." Kyle's hand gripped the balcony railing. The wood creaked. "I'm going to kill him," he said very calmly. "You're not." "I might. He's not worth the political complication." "He's not." Kyle's grip loosened, released. He took a breath. "But you are." She looked at him. In the moonlight, the sharp planes of his face were softened. The scars on his throat caught the light silvery. "Why are you like this?" she asked. "They say you're ruthless, cold, that you crushed 3 packs before 25. I did. Then why are you so careful with me?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that Alara thought he might not answer. "Because I was not always the Alpha King," he said finally. "Before I was powerful, I was small. I was a runt, actually. The smallest pup in my litter. My father's pack did not value small things." Alara stared. She could not reconcile the word runt with the man sitting beside her. He was the largest wolf she'd ever seen. "I grew late," he said, reading her expression. "My wolf manifested at 16. Late bloomer, they called it. But for the first 16 years of my life, I was what you were. Small, overlooked, handled roughly." He touched the scar on his nose. "This is from my father." "Oh. So when I say I understand what they did to you, I don't mean it abstractly. I mean I remember exactly how it feels to have someone else's boot on your face. And I will never be that boot. Not to you. Not to anyone under my protection." The hollow in Alara's chest ached. Not with emptiness this time, with something trying to fill it. Something warm and terrible and too big for the space available. "I wish I could feel this properly," she whispered. "The bond. I wish I could feel you the way you feel me." "We'll get your spirit back," he said. "And if we can't, then I will love you without it." He said it simply, like fact. The bond makes it easier, not required. But the spirit was proving impossible to find. Kyle's intelligence network was formidable, the best in 6 territories, and yet vessels had vanished like smoke. His shop, his records, his contacts, all gone. The vials he'd been storing were unaccounted for, including the one with gold light that belonged to Alara. On the 23rd day, Kale's head of intelligence, a sharp-eyed female wolf named Sarah, brought a report. "We traced him to the Blackmoor market," she said. They were in Kale's study, a warm room, lined with maps and smelling of leather and old paper. He sold most of his inventory there. Low-grade spirits, omega spirits, nothing remarkable. "And hers?" Kyle asked. Sarah hesitated. "That's the problem. He didn't sell it at Blackmoor. He sold it separately, privately, to a buyer who specifically requested golden-grade essence. Who? Alpha Rain of the Iron Veil Pack." Silence, heavy as stone. Alara didn't know the name, but from the way Kale's entire body went still, the way Sarah's eyes dropped to the floor, the way the air in the room seemed to thicken, she understood. "Who is Alpha Rain?" she asked. Kale's voice was flat. "My brother." The story came out in pieces, not from Cole directly, but from Sarah, from snippets of overheard conversation, from Mira's relentless library research. Kyle had a brother, half-brother, Rain born to a different mother, 2 years younger. When Kyle had risen to power, Rain had broken off from the Northern Pack and established his own territory to the east, Iron Veil. They'd maintained a fragile peace for 5 years. The fragility was the problem. "Rahan wants the throne," Sarah told Alara one afternoon. They were in the kitchen. Sarah was peeling apples with a small knife, while Alara kneaded bread. She'd insisted on being useful. The kitchen staff had tried to refuse her, but Alara had planted herself at the counter, with a look that brooked no argument. She needed to work, needed her hands busy. "The throne isn't hereditary," Sarah continued. "It's won by strength. Kyle holds it because no one can challenge him. But if someone weakened him, if they had leverage—" "A mate spirit," Alara said quietly. the ultimate leverage. Sarah's knife sliced through apple flesh in one clean motion. Your spirit isn't just any spirit, Elara. When Vessels extracted it, he noticed something. The gold color. That's not Omega. That's... What? Sarah looked at her directly. Royal bloodline. Old royal. First wolf descent. Possibly. The knife stopped. Sarah set down the apple. Your parents, she said carefully. The border raid that killed them. Did you ever think it was strange that an entire family was targeted, that 2 orphans were absorbed into a random pack without any investigation into their lineage? The bread dough went still beneath Elara's hands. A cold feeling spread through her. Not the empty cold of the missing spirit. Something older. Something that tasted like buried truth clawing its way up through years of dirt. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe you weren't born an Omega. Maybe you were made one. Elara confronted Darius, not in person. By communication crystal, which Kael allowed only because he was standing directly beside her, with his arms crossed and his jaw set like granite. Darius's face flickered into view, green-tinged by the crystal's light. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. Smaller. Alpha Darius, Elara said. Her voice was steady. She was surprised by that. My parents, the border raid. Tell me the truth. Darius licked his lips. His eyes darted to Kael's face, found no mercy there. Darted back. It wasn't a raid, he said. It was an assassination, ordered by the Council of Territories. Your father he had a claim, a legitimate claim to the Northern Throne, before Kael's line, before any of the current alphas. Your father was a direct descendant of the first pack, the first alpha. The room tilted. Elara gripped the edge of the desk. You knew, she said, this whole time. You knew who I was. We were told to suppress it, raise you as Omega, keep you weak, keep your wolf dormant. The council decided. He stopped, swallowed. They decided it was better to let the bloodline die quietly than to risk another succession war. And the spirit dealer? Kael said. His voice was ice. Vessels. He was placed in your territory deliberately. Darius nodded, miserably. An extraction contingency, in case her wolf ever manifested fully despite the suppression. They wanted access to her spirit, to study it, or destroy it. And instead, Kael said she walked in and sold it to him voluntarily, and he sold it to my brother. I didn't know Rain would. Darius started. Enough. Kael waved a hand. The crystal went dark. He stood in silence for a moment, staring at the blank surface. Then he looked at Elara. Your father, he said, had a stronger claim to my throne than I do. I don't want your throne. I know. He almost smiled. But Rain doesn't know that. He has your spirit. He has proof of your bloodline, and he can use both as justification for challenge. Challenge. If he claims to be acting on behalf of the true bloodline as champion for your lineage, he can challenge my rule. It would force a war. Elara felt sick. So give him the throne. If it stops. No. Kael's voice was absolute. Not because I want power. Because Rain would destroy everything I've built. Every wolf I protect. Every family in Thornhold. He isn't cruel for pleasure. He's cruel for efficiency. He'd turn this territory into a war machine. Then what do we do? Kael turned to her. In the lamplight of the study, his amber eyes burned steady. I get your spirit back, and I make it very clear to my brother what happens when you touch something that belongs to me. War came faster than anyone expected. Rain didn't wait for diplomatic channels. didn't wait for the formal challenge to process through the council. He brought his army to the northern border on a Tuesday morning, 1,500 wolves strong, and sent a message that arrived at Thornhold by midnight. The message was simple. It read, "Send the girl, or I use her spirit to awaken the first wolf rite and unmake your bond before it sets." Ilara read it, standing in Kyle's war room, surrounded by maps and strategy boards and grim-faced commanders. Mira was asleep upstairs, unaware. Ilara had insisted on that. "He can do that?" she asked. "Unmake the bond." With a royal spirit and the right ritual, theoretically, yes. Sarah stood at the map table, her face drawn tight. The first wolf rite was used to forge the original pack bonds. It can also sever them. If he awakens your spirit inside the ritual circle using your essence as the key, he could sever every bond Kyle holds. One of the commanders finished. Not just yours. Every pack member bonded to the Alpha. Thousands of wolves suddenly untethered. Chaos, another said. Civil war within our own ranks. Kyle stood at the head of the table. He hadn't spoken since reading the message. His stillness was absolute, the kind of stillness that preceded earthquakes. "How long does the ritual take?" he asked. 3 days to prepare. 1 night to execute. The full moon provides the conduit. Full moon is in 5 days. Yes. Kyle nodded once. Then we have 4 days to take it back. He looked at Ilara. In his eyes she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not rage, not determination. Fear. Buried deep, controlled, ruthlessly, but present. Fear of losing her. Not physically, spiritually. The bond that was already threadbare without her wolf, severed completely by his own brother's hands. "I'm coming with you," she said. "Absolutely not. It's my spirit. My blood. If the ritual requires my essence as a key, maybe my physical presence can disrupt it. Or it could accelerate it." He moved toward her. Close. That hovering hand finally landed on her shoulder, warm and heavy and grounding. "Ilara, I'm not something you keep safe on a shelf," she said. "I'm not a thing to protect. I'm a person. And he has a piece of me. I want it back." His hand tightened. Not painfully, possessively. His thumb brushed the junction of her neck and shoulder, right where a mating mark would go if they had one. If her wolf were present to receive it. "If anything happens to you," he said quietly, "I will not survive it. Do you understand that, sort metaphorically? My wolf will break its cage, and nothing in this territory will be safe. Then we'd better make sure nothing happens to me." He stared at her. For a long moment, something warred behind his eyes. The Alpha who commanded, the man who feared, the mate who wanted. "You stay behind me," he said finally. "At all times, you do not engage. You do not put yourself between any wolf and danger. And if I tell you to run, you run. Agreed." "Liar," he said softly, but the corner of his mouth turned up, and his hand slid from her shoulder to the back of her neck, cradling it, pulling her forward, until her forehead rested against his chest. He was warm. He smelled of pine and smoke, and that deep, wild current underneath. She closed her eyes. The hollow in her chest pulsed, reached. Almost something whispered. Almost. The march to Iron Vale took 2 days. Kyle's force was smaller than Rain's. 1,000 wolves against 1,500. But quality outweighed quantity. Thornhold wolves were trained differently. Not just for battle, but for coordination. They moved like a single organism through the dark forest, silent and precise. Ilara rode in the command vehicle with Kyle and Sarah. She watched the forest pass, pine giving way to darker spruce. The air grew colder, sharper, smelling of frozen earth and iron. On the second night, they made camp at the edge of Ironvale territory. Fires were kept small and low. Wolves spoke in murmurs. Ilara couldn't sleep. She sat outside the command tent, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak Cale had given her, watching the stars through the canopy gaps. The cold bit at her nose. Her breath plumed white. Footsteps behind her. Not Cale. The stride was different. Lighter. It was Callum. She recognized him instantly. The wolf from Ashvale. Gregor's friend, who had paused in the kitchen doorway and almost spoken. He stood at the edge of the firelight, wearing Thornhold colors now. When had he defected? "I joined after you left," he said, reading her look. "Requested transfer. Kyle's pack accepted me." "Why?" He sat down. Not close. Respectful distance. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe 20. Nervous hands. "Because what they did to you was wrong," he said simply, "and I never said anything. I watched Gregor hurt you for years, and I never once opened my mouth. And when you left, when the Alpha King took you, I realized that silence isn't neutral. Silence is a choice, and I'd been choosing wrong." Ilara looked at him for a long moment. "I don't forgive you," she said. "I know. I'm not asking for that." He pulled his cloak tighter. "I'm asking for the chance to do better. Starting now. Starting now is a war." "Yeah." He almost smiled, rueful. "Young. I'm aware." They sat in silence after that. Not comfortable exactly, but something. A beginning, maybe. Or at least an acknowledgement that beginnings were possible. The battle began at dawn on the 4th day. Ilara will remember it in fragments. The way the morning light turned the forest gold and red. The way Kyle's wolf manifested enormous and midnight black with amber eyes that blazed like lanterns. And the sound that came from his throat shook the ground. The way 1,500 Ironvale wolves poured from the tree line like a dark tide. The collision of bodies. The sounds. She'd never heard sounds like that. Not in nightmare, not in imagination. The wet crunch of impact. The screaming, which was not human and not animal, but something in between. She stayed behind the front line, in the command position, with Sarah and a guard detail of 6. She could see the battle from a ridge, could see Kyle's wolf cutting through the enemy force like a blade through cloth, could see the Thornhold wolves holding formation while Ironvale's larger numbers broke against them like waves against rock. But Rain wasn't on the field. She realized it before Sarah did. "He's not fighting," Ilara said. "Where is he?" Sarah scanned the battlefield. Her face changed. "The ritual. He started early. The full moon isn't until tomorrow, but the preparation—" "Where?" "There's an old temple. The first wolf shrine. 3 miles east of here." Ilara was moving before she finished thinking about it. Down the ridge through the trees away from the battle. She heard Sarah shout behind her, heard the guard wolves scramble to follow. She didn't stop. She couldn't, because the hollow in her chest was doing something new. It was pulling. Not the faint, distant pull of the mate bond. Something directional, specific. Like a compass needle spinning and locking onto north, her spirit was calling her. 3 miles through dark spruce forest, barefoot again, because the boots she'd been given weren't made for running through underbrush. Pine needles and cold earth and sharp stones. Her feet bled. She didn't stop. The temple appeared through the trees like a wound in the forest. Old stone, older than the packs, older than the territories, covered in moss and lichen, and carved with symbols she couldn't read, but felt in her chest like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Guards at the entrance. 2 wolves in iron veil colours. They saw her, started to shift. Callum hit the first one from the side, materializing from the trees like a shadow. When had he followed her? The second guard turned, and Sarah's wolf took him down, silver-furred and efficient. "Go," Sarah said, human again, and breathing hard. "We'll hold the entrance. Go." Ilara went. Inside the temple was cold and dark and smelled of blood. Fresh blood, metallic and warm, painted in circles on the stone floor. Candles arranged in patterns she didn't understand. And at the center, a man. Rain. He looked like Kyle. That was the first thing she noticed, and it hurt to notice it. The same black hair, the same height, the same broad structure. But where Kyle was scarred and weathered and warm underneath the cold rain was smooth, unmarked. His eyes were not amber. They were grey like winter ice. He was holding a vial. Gold light pulsed inside it. Her light, her spirit. "You came to me," Rain said. He sounded surprised, pleased. "I expected my brother to keep you locked away. But here you are. Give it back." Her voice echoed in the stone chamber. "Your spirit." He held the vial up, examining it. The gold light flickered and reached visibly toward her, like a hand stretching across the distance. "Do you know what this is? What you are? This isn't an Omega spirit, Ilara. This is a Queen's spirit, an Alpha's spirit forced dormant by suppressants and lies. If I activate this in the ritual circle, I can claim the right of succession through your bloodline. I become the legitimate Alpha King. I don't consent to that. You don't need to. The spirit is separate from you now. It's just essence, material." He turned the vial in his fingers. "Though I admit having you physically present makes it stronger. The resonance..." I said, "Give it back." Rain studied her. The ice-grey eyes moved over her face, her bare feet bleeding on the stone, her thin frame still underfed despite 3 weeks of proper meals, the scar on her face. "He really does care about you," Rain said. Something moved in his voice, not cruelty, curiosity. "My brother. I've never seen him care about anything. Not truly. He rules, he fights, he builds, but caring, that's new. People change when they find something worth caring about." "Do they?" Rain looked at the vial again, and for just a moment, just a flicker, something crossed his face that didn't belong to a villain. It looked like longing, like a man standing outside a lit window in winter, watching warmth he couldn't access. "I had a mate once," he said, quietly, almost to himself. She rejected the bond, chose someone else, someone weaker, someone less. "Because I was..." He stopped, set his jaw. "Because I was too much like our father," she said. "Too hungry, too cold." Ilara stood very still. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," Rain said, his voice hardening again. "I'm telling you so you understand. I don't want your spirit because I hate my brother. I want it because it's the only way I know to make people take me seriously. To make them see me as something other than the younger son. The cast-off. The one who wasn't good enough. There are other ways. Not for me." His hand closed around the vial. "Not anymore." He began to speak the ritual words, old language guttural and resonant. The blood circles on the floor began to glow, the candles flared, and the gold light in the vial blazed bright as a sun reaching, toward her. The pull in Ilara's chest became a roar, The hollow space expanded, contracted, clenched. It was like every cell in her body was trying to reach across the room toward that vial, toward the piece of herself that had been taken. She moved without thinking, stepped into the ritual circle. The blood glowed hot beneath her bare feet. The symbols on the walls blazed. Rain's eyes widened. "What are you doing? You'll disrupt the—" "That's mine," Elara said, and she reached, not with her hands, with something deeper, something that had been dormant for 9 years under suppressants and lies, something that the extraction hadn't fully taken because it was rooted too deep, woven into her blood and bone, and the very architecture of her DNA. The first wolf bloodline, the alpha spirit that no dealer's copper coil could fully extract because it wasn't just a wolf. It was heritage, lineage, the original covenant between wolf and moon. The vial cracked. Gold light poured out like liquid fire, filling the ritual circle, filling the temple, filling Elara. She gasped, fell to her knees. It was the extraction in reverse, but worse or better she couldn't tell. Everything that had been taken rushing back in. Not just the wolf, the senses. The world in full color, full scent, full dimension. Pine and blood and stone and candle wax and rain's fear, sharp and acrid. And underneath it all, far away but burning bright, the mate bond, blazing to full strength like a bonfire fed with dry wood. Kyle. She could feel him. Not as a faint tug through a pinhole, as an ocean, as gravity. Her wolf unfurled inside her. Not the weak, dormant thing the suppressants had kept chained. The real one, gold-furred and enormous and ancient and furious. It opened its eyes inside her mind, and for the first time in Elara's life she heard it speak. Finally, it said, "Finally." Rain backed away. The ritual circle was shattered, its purpose consumed by the spirit's return. He held the broken vial empty, now useless. His face was pale. "That's not possible," he said. "A forced recall, without a bridge, without—" "The blood is the bridge," Elara said. Her voice was different, resonant, layered with something old. The first wolf bloodline doesn't need a mate bond to call its spirit home. It just needs its host to finally stop being afraid. She stood. The gold light dimmed, settling into her skin, her bones, her blood. She felt whole, more than whole. She felt like a door had been opened that she hadn't known was closed. Rain stood very still. His grey eyes were wide, and in them Elara saw it clearly now. Not a monster. Not a villain. A lonely man who had tried to steal power because he didn't know how to earn love. A man who looked at his brother's mate bond and saw everything he'd been denied. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it made him real. "It's over," Elara said. "The spirit is back. The ritual is broken. You have no claim." "I know," Rain said. His voice was empty, hollow, like hers had been 3 weeks ago. Heavy footsteps in the corridor, running. The amber glow of wolf eyes in the dark. Kyle burst through the temple entrance in half-shift, his body caught between forms too large and too wild, black fur rippling across his shoulders, claws, extended eyes blazing with a fury that had no ceiling. He saw Elara first, whole, standing, glowing faintly with residual gold. Then he saw Rain. The sound Kyle made was not from this century. It was older than language, a roar that shook dust from the ceiling and cracked one of the stone pillars. He crossed the temple in 3 strides, seizing Rain by the throat and lifting him off the ground with one clawed hand. "You took her spirit," Kyle snarled. His voice was barely recognizable, more wolf than man. "You would have used it to destroy us." Rain didn't struggle, didn't fight. His feet dangled, his hands hung at his sides. "Yes," he said. "Give me one reason." Silence. Kyle, Ilara's hand on his arm. She could feel the tension in him, the absolute readiness to close his fist and end this. The wolf inside him screaming for it. "Kale, look at me." He didn't look. His hand tightened. "He's your brother. He stopped being my brother when he touched what's mine." "He's alone," she said it quietly. "He's been alone for a long time. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. And killing him here in this temple over me, that's not who you want to be." Slowly, so slowly, Kyle turned his head. The amber eyes found her. The wolf in them was raging, thrashing against its cage. But beneath that, the man who'd been a runt, who'd been small and hurt, and had chosen deliberately not to become the boot. His hand opened. Rain dropped to the stone floor, gasping, clutching his throat. "You're exiled," Kyle said. His voice was raw. "Cross my border again, and I will kill you. Touch her again, and I will kill you slowly. That's the only mercy you get from me." Rain nodded, coughing, not looking up. Kyle turned away from him, turned to Ilara, and the wildness in his eyes shifted, the fury drained. What was left was something raw and exposed and achingly tender. "You got it back," he said. He could feel it. She could see that he could feel it. The bond between them no longer a trickle through a pinhole, but a river wide and deep and running both ways. I got it back." He crossed to her in one step. His hands, human again, shaking, cupped her face, tilted it up. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, the scar, the line of her jaw. "I felt you," he said, his voice cracking. "On the battlefield. I felt the bond explode, open, and I thought you were dying. I thought that was what death felt like from the other side." "Not dying," she said. "Coming back to life." He kissed her. Not gently. Not tentatively. With the full desperate force of a man who had waited 6 years for a bond that arrived broken and had just felt it become whole. His mouth against hers was heat and pressure and claiming and promise. The wolf in her chest rose to meet it, gold meeting amber howling. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ilara realized she was crying. Not from sadness, from fullness, from the sheer overwhelming sensation of being complete after years of hollowness. "Mark me," she said. "Here, now, before anything else tries to take this from us." His eyes went molten. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." His mouth found the junction of her neck and shoulder, the place his thumb had traced weeks ago on a balcony in Thornhold. His teeth sharp and deliberate broke skin. And the bond, the full living, breathing, eternal bond, locked into place with a sound like a bell rung in an empty cathedral. Like the last note of a symphony. Like every door in every room she'd ever been locked out of, opening at once. She marked him back. Her own teeth, her own claim. He shuddered against her, a sound escaping him that was half growl, half gasp. His arms wrapped around her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat against her sternum, right where the copper coil had burned. "Mine," he said into her hair. "Mine," she said back. The war ended that day. With their ritual broken and their alpha absent, the Iron Veil wolves fell back. Many surrendered outright, the rest scattered into the eastern forests. The return to Thornhold took 2 days. Ilara rode beside Kale this time, not across from him. His hand didn't hover near her anymore. It rested on her thigh, her shoulder, the back of her neck. constant contact, as if he couldn't believe the bond was real unless he could feel her skin under his fingers. Mira, upon seeing her sister, said 3 words. "Your eyes are gold." They were. Elara checked in the mirror of their suite. Her eyes, which had been brown her entire life, now held flecks of gold that caught the light. The wolf showing through, the bloodline no longer suppressed, marking itself visible. The pack knew immediately. 1,000 wolves felt the new bond lock into place through their connection to their alpha, felt the presence of a Luna. Not just any Luna, an alpha-blooded one, carrying the first wolf's lineage. The whispers traveled faster than feet. The formal ceremony happened a week later, not because Kyle needed permission, but because Elara wanted it. Wanted the pack to see her not as a rescued Omega, not as a political asset, not as a bloodline to be leveraged, as herself. She stood in the great hall of Thornhold wearing dark blue, her hair loose, her scar visible. She'd specifically asked the healer to stop treating it. It was part of her. It was evidence of survival. She wasn't going to hide it. Kyle stood beside her in black as always. No crown as always. His hand engulfed hers. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a private rhythm, their rhythm. The pack bowed. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. She could feel it through the bond, hundreds of wolves offering their recognition freely, willingly to the Luna who smelled of gold and pine, and something ancient. Later, after the ceremony, after the feast, after Myra had eaten enough roast lamb to feed a small army and fallen asleep in an armchair by the fire, Kale found Elara on the balcony, their balcony, the one overlooking the western forest. He stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. She fit there perfectly, like a key in a lock, like a period at the end of a sentence. "Rain sent a message," he said into her hair. "What did it say?" "One word. Sorry." Elara was quiet for a moment. The night air smelled of frost and pine and wood smoke from the feast fires. Her wolf curled contentedly inside her, warm and golden and complete. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "I don't know." His arms tightened. "But I'm not going to spend tonight thinking about my brother." "What are you going to spend tonight thinking about?" He turned her in his arms. The amber eyes were soft. The scarred face was open in a way he never showed anyone else, never would show anyone else. This was hers alone. "The fact that 3 weeks ago you were on your knees scrubbing a floor," he said, "and now you're standing on a balcony as Luna of the largest territory in the known world. And you smell like gold, and you're mine. You're mine too, you know. It goes both ways." "I know." He smiled, actually smiled full and real, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, made him look like the runt he'd been before. Power and war and years of iron control. That's the best part. Below them in the courtyard, wolves moved between buildings in the warm light. Children chased each other between the pines. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life continued as it always does in the small and ordinary moments between the extraordinary ones. Elara leaned into Kale's chest and closed her eyes. His heartbeat was steady under her ear, strong and slow and constant. The bond hummed between them, gold and amber intertwined, whole and unbreakable. Somewhere in the Eastern Territories, a man with grey eyes stood alone in an empty temple, watching a broken vial catch the moonlight. He turned it over in his fingers, set it down gently on the altar, and walked away. In the library of Thornhold, Myra slept with a book open on her chest. Not a romance this time, a history of the first wolf bloodline. She'd dog-eared 17 pages. In the margins in pencil she'd written, "Ask Alara about this." On the balcony, the Alpha King pressed his lips to his Luna's temple. She could feel his breath warm against her skin, slow and even. His hand rested over her sternum, right where the burn mark was fading to nothing, right where the gold light lived. She covered his hand with hers, their fingers interlaced. The moon rose full and bright above the pines, and somewhere deep in her chest, a wolf with golden fur lifted its head and howled, not in pain, not in grief, not in longing, in answer.